Greetings, everyone. On behalf of the Russia and Eurasia program at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, I am pleased to welcome you to what promises to be a fascinating roundtable on geopolitics in the South Caucasus and their implications for U.S. foreign policy. My name is Arek Burakovsky, and I'm the Assistant Director of the program. We could hardly have picked a better time to be talking about the latest developments in Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and across the region. We are honored to partner on this event with Sokhumi State University in Tbilisi, Georgia. And this event resulted from our collaboration with an alumnus of Fletcher GMAP, the Global Master of Arts program, Lasha Kasradze. I would like to express our gratitude to him for helping us convene it. And I'm delighted to introduce Deborah Nutter, who will be chairing the roundtable. She is the former senior associate dean of the Fletcher School, founding director of GMAP, and a professor of practice who taught courses on historic leaders and geopolitics. Deborah, let me turn it over to you to begin the discussion.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here. We have to be efficient with our time because we have several speakers and many questions that are going to be asked. But we are asking our panelists to address 4 questions. And the questions are, what interest does the United States have in the South Caucasus? How can the United States help preserve regional stability and prevent conflict escalation in Nagorno-Karabakh, South Ossetia, and Abkhazia? How can the United States contend with the regional interests of Russia, China, Turkey, and Iran? How can the United States coordinate its policy toward the region with the European Union? How will U.S. priorities in the region change over the next 4 years? Will the new Biden administration expand U.S. support for democratic change, better governance, and international integration of Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan? These are very difficult questions to answer in times such as these. These are changing geopolitical times, and during changing geopolitical times, the answers that leaders must deal with are never easy. It looks easy years later when historians write about them, but it is not easy for policymakers at the time. And these times are so very much uncertain. And therefore, for every policymaker, decisions involve risk. Let me just quickly mention a few things going on in the world, and then I'll ask Lasha to introduce the rector and say a few things himself. We're dealing with the rise of China and its increasing desire to play a role on the world scene in all ways, economically, politically, and militarily. We're also seeing the development of something called the Indo-Pacific Alliance and how that will work with NATO. And that's going to be a very, very complicated question. India, of course, is also on the rise. And finally, what is Russia going to do, either under Putin or not under Putin? I'm going to turn to Lasha now, my very, very competent and talented former student.
Unmute. Thank you so much, Dean Nutter, for your kind introduction. I'll just start by briefly introducing the rector of the Sokhumi State University, Mr. Zurab Khondelidze. Mr. Khondelidze, as I mentioned, is a rector of the SU. He is the initiator of the concept of university diplomacy, which we all think is a flagship program or will be a flagship program of the SU as it pertains to all the regional questions and issues of the day and has a pretty strong explanatory power in terms of understanding the region. Mr. Khonelidze has also written a book called Georgian Paradigm of Peace, in which he offers a vision of a common holistic space of the South Caucasus as an offering, if you will, for peace creation and peace building. And we think that these concepts carry very serious potential in terms of contributing to conflict resolution in the region. Mr. Khonelidze is a honoree of highest honor of diplomacy in Georgia, which he received in 1997. He was a head of diplomatic mission of Georgia to the Republic of Belarus. And his official title is Plenipotentiary Representative of the Commonwealth of Independent States. With that, I will transfer this back to you, Dean Nutter, and we'll move on. Thank you.
მინდა სოხუმის სახელმწიფო უნივერსიტეტის სახელით დაგიდასტუროთ ჩემი გულწრფელი პატივისცემა. კიდევ ერთხელ მოგესალმოთ და გისურვოთ წარმატებები. მადლობა დღევანდელი დღისთვის და იმ შესაძლებლობისთვის, რასაც თქვენ აჩენთ არა მხოლოდ ჩვენი უნივერსიტეტისთვის, არამედ ჩვენი ქვეყნისთვის, უკეთესი ქართული სახელმწიფოს უკეთესი მომავლისთვის.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great opportunity for me to introduce myself, and I'm very interested in this discussion, and this is a great opportunity and for our university to introduce you our thoughts.
შეზღუდული დროიდან გამომდინარე, ძალიან მოკლედ შევეცდები საქართველოს და რეგიონთან დაკავშირებით ჩემი მოგზაურობული მოსაზრება. გაგიზიაროთ.
I will be very brief to introduce my thoughts about Georgia and South Caucasus, about the regional security.
Posabჭოთა ტრანსფორმაციის ზღურბზე მყოფი საქართველოს განვითარებადი ქვეყნის სტატუსი მინიჭებული ავტორიტეტული საერთაშორისო ორგანიზაციების მიერ გეოგრაფიული ცნება უფროა ვიდრე სახელმწიფოებრივი.
The status of Georgia's developing country is on the brink of post-Soviet transformation granted by the authoritative international organizations, and it is a geographical concept rather than a state one.
ამ პრობლემას მე არ ვხედავ საერთაშორისო ორგანიზაციებში, ეს პრობლემა არის ჩვენი ქართული სახელმწიფოს.
But this problem is not in international organizations, but this is our problem.
ჩემი როგორც საქართველოს მოქალაქის და სოხუმის სახელმწიფო უნივერსიტეტის მიზანი არის შემდეგი. ქართულ საზოგადოებას, ეგრეთ წოდებულ პოლიტიკურ ელიტას, რომლის დიდი ნაწილი საუბედუროდ არის ყალბი, შევახსენოთ არა მხოლოდ ცნება, სამშობლო, რაც ისედაც ვიცით და ხშირად გაუცნობრებლად ვეწირებით, არამედ თანამედროვე სახელმწიფოს მნიშვნელობა, რომელიც სამშობლოსათვის გაცნობიერებულად შეუწირავად სამსახურის შესაძლებლობას იძლევა.
My and Sokhumi State University's goal is to remind Georgian society and so-called political elite, most part of them are false, and we already know that and often unknowingly attribute also the meaning of the modern state, which allows us to serve the homeland consciously without sacrifice.
Ცხადია, ქვეყნის მომავალი თავისით არ მოდის. ის ადამიანებს საკუთარი ძალისხმევით მოყავთ. ამდენად აუცილებელია სტრატეგიული აზროვნება და პირველ რიგში წესრიგის დამყარება ჩვენ საზრუნებაში. წინააღმდეგ შემთხვევაში იგი არც ქვეყანაში მყარდება და ამის ნათელი მაგალითია საქართველოში დღევანდელი მდგომარეობა.
Sure, the future of the country does not come by itself. It brings people through its own efforts. It is necessary to think strategically and first of all to establish order in our thinking. Otherwise, it will not be established in the country either. A clear example of this is the current situation in Georgia.
ამდენად გადაუდებელ ამოცანად მიმაჩნია გავიაზროთ, რომ საქართველო რელიგიურად, ისტორიულად და გეოგრაფიულად იმ გეოპოლიტიკურ, გეოეკონომიკურ და სამხედრო პოლიტიკურ ინტერესთა გადაკვეთის ეპიცენტრია, რომელსაც არა მხოლოდ ქართული, არამედ სამხრეთ კავკასიური, ერთიანი კავკასიური სოციოკულტურული და პოლიტიკური სივრცე ჰქვია. ჩვენი ბედიღბალის განსაზღვრა სცილდება ქვეყნის საზღვრებს და იძენს რეგიონულ და უფრო მეტი გლობალურ მასშტაბებს.
So we can consider it an urgent task to understand that religiously, historically, and geographically, Georgia is at the epicenter of the intersection of geopolitical, geoeconomics, and military political interests, which is called not only Georgian state, but also the South Caucasus, a unified Caucasian social, cultural, and political space. The definition of our fortune goes beyond the borders of the country, gaining regional and global scales.
ნებისმიერი ქვეყანა, მათ შორის ჩვენი სამშობლო საქართველო, სივრცითი მოვლენაა. როგორც ცხოვრობს, ასევე ქმნის სივრცეს და ვერ იტანს სიცარიელეს. ამასთანავე ხასიათდება სივრცისთვის დამახასიათებელი ყველა თვისებით, იბადება, იზრდება და კვდება.
The country is a special phenomenon, as it lives and it also creates space and cannot stand emptiness, and also it is characterized by all the features of the space that is born, grows, and then is dying.
საუბედუროდ ეს პროცესი საქართველოში დაწყებულია.
Unfortunately, this process has begun in Georgia.
საქართველოს ორგანულად მთლიან, ერთიან, მულტიეთნიკურ ქართულ სახელმწიფოდ გარდაქმნა მოითხოვს პოლიტიკის ძირითადი რეგულატორის, დამატებითი ინტერესისა და მსოფლიო მომწესრიგებელ ძალთა წონასწორობის დაცვით, ქვეყანამ შეიძინოს სოფხედველობისა და გარემო პირობების შესაბამისი საერთაშორისო ფუნქცია, დაასაბუთოს ერთიანი სივრცის საჭიროება მათ შორის გარე სამყაროსათვის.
In order for Georgia to become an organically whole, unified, multi-ethnic Georgian state, it is necessary to acquire an international function corresponding to the worldview and environmental conditions to justify the need for a common space, including for the outside world, in compliance with the main regulator of the policy, additional interests, and the balance of world order.
ამ საერთო მიზნის რეალიზაცია ჩვენი უნივერსიტეტისაგან მოითხოვს ხარისხობრივად ახალი ცოდნის, ახალი სიცოცხლის წარმოქმნას, რასაც ემსახურება თქვენს მიერ ბატონობაში აღნიშნული ჩვენი სამენოვანი წიგნი მშვიდობის ქართული პარადიგმა, რომელიც შედგება ორი პროექტისაგან.
The realization of the goal required not only transformation from the university, but also the emergence of qualitatively new knowledge, new life. This is exactly what our trilingual book, Georgian Paradigm of Peace, serves. It consists of two projects.
პირველი პროექტი საუნივერსიტეტო დიპლომატია, რომელიც არა მხოლოდ ქართული, არამედ გლობალური პრობლემის, კონფლიქტის, მშვიდობიანი დარეგულირების ახალი მოდელია, რამაც უნივერსიტეტის ტრანსფორმაცია და დამატებით არასაუნივერსიტეტო რესურსის სახით მეორე აუცილებელი სუბიექტის დიპლომატიის მოძიება და მასთან შერწყმა განაპირობა ორი თავსებადი თვისობრიობის უნივერსიტეტისა და დიპლომატიის ერთიანობამ კი ჩამოაყალიბა ახალი პარადიგმა თეორიიდან ქმედებისაკენ. შექმნა საერთაშორისო ურთიერთობისა და დიპლომატიის არაკლასიკური ან ფორმალური, არამედ სრულიად ახალი სახეობა საუნივერსიტეტო დიპლომატია როგორც სისტემის შემქმნელი და არა მსახური თავისთავადობა. პარადიგმა მშვიდობის უზრუნველყოფის ახალი მეთოდოლოგია.
University diplomacy is a new model, not for the Kartli, which is the region of Georgia, but also for the global problem, the peaceful settlement of the conflict, which led to the transformation of the university, and in addition, a non-university research to find and merge with another necessary subject, diplomacy. The combination of two compatible qualities, university and diplomacy, has created a new paradigm from theory to action, creating not a classical or formal, but a completely new kind of international relations and diplomacy, university diplomacy, a new kind of international relations as a creator of the system, not a servant, a new methodology for assuring peace.
მეორე პროექტი სამხრეთ კავკასიის ახალი გეოპოლიტიკური სივრცე კავკასიასგან იხილავს როგორც მხოლოდ კულტურულ ცივილიზაციურ ერთობად, ხოლო სამხრეთ კავკასიას სუვერენული სახელმწიფოებისაგან შემდგარ იმ ერთიან რეგიონულ სივრცეთ, რომელიც პრაქტიკულად არასოდეს არ დაკარგავს თავის გეოსტრატეგიულ მნიშვნელობას. პირიქით, მართალია იგი მისი შემადგენელი ქვეყნების ხალხების საერთო სახლია, მაგრამ გლობალური, რეგიონული და ნაციონალური ინტერესების მორიგებით აქვს შესაძლებლობა საქართველოსთან გამომდინარე გადამწყვეტი როლი ითამაშოს ახალი ერთიანი რეგიონული მოდელის შექმნაში. მით უფრო მაშინ, როცა ხედავთ ის პროცესები, რაც დღეს სოფლიოში ხდება, როგორ იცვლება სამყარო, მრავალპოლუსიანი ხდება. და იმარჯვებს მით უმეტეს ჩვენს რეგიონში რეგიონული პოლიტიკა.
Second project, South Caucasus, a new political space. We consider the Caucasus as only a cultural civilizational unity, and the South Caucasus is as a single regional space consisting of southern states which will practically never lose its geostrategic importance. On the contrary, although it is a common home of its constituent countries, peoples, but historically and morally the only one, Georgia has the ability to be global, regional, and happy in the process of reconciliation of national interests. And this is our fate as well, our neighboring states, to play a decisive role in the process of creating a new unified regional model. And this is a way to make others complicit. We all know that today world is very changeable, and there are many processes in the world which are really very important.
ერთ წუთს ეს ყურადღებას საგართმევთ იმ ფორმატთან დაკავშირებით, რომელიც გაჟღერდა და მას ერდოღანის ფორმატი ეწოდება.
And now I want to speak about new format which is supposed by the Turkish President Erdogan.
ვფიქრობთ, რომ ეს არის არასრულფასოვანი და უფრო მეტიც საფრთხის შემცველი ქართული სახელმწიფოსთვის.
First of all, we think that this project is very dangerous for Georgian state.
იმიტომ რომ
It's not completed.
იგი კეტავს სამოქმედო არეალს და ქართულ სივრცეს.
It locks our regional space.
და ზოგადად თვლი ამ ფორმატის შესახებ თქვენ ძალიან კარგად მოგეხსენებათ, ზოგადად თვლი რომ ნებისმიერი ფორმატი ქართულ სახელმწიფო ინტერესზე იქნება მორგებული ერთადერთ შემთხვევაში, როცა ფორმატის ნაწილი და გამსაზღვრელი იქნება ორი სუბიექტი, ეს არის ამერიკის შეერთებული შტატები და ეს არის ევროკავშირი.
And I think that any format will be suitable for Georgia if the part of this format will be the United States of America and the European Union.
და დღეს რეალურად არის საშიშროება და საფრთხე, რომ სამხრეთ კავკასიის ნანატრი დეოკუპაციის ნაცვლად შეიძლება ჩვენ ოკუპაციის პროცესის ლეგიტიმაციის ხელისშემწყობი ქვეყანა ვიქცეთ.
And now there is a threat that instead of long-awaited occupation of the South Caucasus and Georgia, there will be a supported process of occupation and its legitimacy.
უფრო მეტიც, ინტეგრაციის ნაცვლად გაგრძელდეს სახელმწიფოთა ერთმანეთისაგან გამიჯვნის პროცესი და არსებული დე-იურე და დე-ფაქტო საზღვრების ნაცვლად ახალი ტიპის საზღვრების წარმოქმნის მოწმენე გავხდეთ.
Also, there is a chance that instead of integration, the process of separation of states will continue, and in addition to the existing de jure and de facto borders, we will witness the emergence of the new types of borders in the region.
თლიანობაში დაირღვევა რეგიონის ერთიანი ეთნოკულტურული სივრცე და სამხრეთ კავკასიის ქვეყნებს შეეზღუდება თავისუფალი და დამოუკიდებელი არჩევანის გაკეთების შესაძლებლობა. რა თქმა უნდა, ეს არც ევროკავშირის და არც ამერიკის შეერთებული შტატების ინტერესებში არ შედის.
In this case, the countries of South Caucasus will lose their sovereignty and independence, and of course, this is not in the will of the United States of America or in the future plans in European Union.
მაგრამ ეს არ ნიშნავს, რომ ჩვენი ვალდებულება და პასუხისმგებლობა რომელიმე ქვეყანას ავკიდოთ. გვესმის პრაგმატული პოლიტიკის არსი და რა თქმა უნდა გამოვრიცხავ ყოველგვარ მსგავს მიდგომას და დამოკიდებულებას. ჩვენს გასაკეთებას ვერავინ ვერ გააკეთებს. ჩვენ უნდა ავიღოთ ჩვენი თვითი ვალდებულება და პასუხისმგებლობა.
But it doesn't mean that Georgia has no responsibility to change its politics. We have our own responsibility and duties and to do, and we must move on and to take steps forward.
მადლობთ. თუ რაიმე კითხვა იქნება მზადვარო.
Thank you very much for your attention, and in the case of any question, we will be very glad to answer you.
Perhaps we should save our questions until the end. Very exciting to welcome the panelists to this session. You have before you very long biographies of all of them. I'm going to spend my time just introducing them and giving their key accomplishments and positions so that we have time to hear from them instead of just about them. We have to be very efficient with our time. So we're going to ask each panelist to speak for 5 minutes. I'll introduce them all first, then we'll let them speak for 5 minutes, and then give them some time to speak among themselves, and then we'll turn this open to the audience. The first person I would like to introduce is Valery Chechalashvili. He's a senior fellow at the Georgian Foundation for Strategic and International Studies. He has been a visiting professor at Sokhumi State University since 2019. He has held various important positions in government. He was first Deputy Foreign Minister and Minister of Finance. Our second panelist is K Srigalaya. He's an associate professor of the Faculty of Social and Political Science at Sokhumi State University. He too has held various government positions and has published numerous articles and books. Our third speaker is Levan Garadza. He's the director of the Center for Peace Education at Sokhumi State University and the chief of the board of the Association of Schools of Attorneys in Georgia. He has extensive government experience in conflict resolution and law. Our fourth speaker is Maya Otaashvili. She is a research fellow and deputy director of the Eurasian program at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. She also serves as the deputy director of research at FPRI, and she is co-editor of their 2017 volume, Does Democracy Matter? Very important question. And finally, we have our very own, Fletcher's very own, assistant professor of international history and associate director of the Brady Johnson program in grand strategy at Yale, a lecturer at the New Economic School in Moscow, a visiting researcher at the Carnegie Moscow Center, a research associate at the Brookings Institution, and a fellow at the German Marshall Fund's Transatlantic Academy. He has written 2 books, one that has helped me very much in my research, The Struggle to Save the Soviet Economy, Mikhail Gorbachev and the Collapse of the USSR, and Putinomics, Power and Money in Resurgent Russia. So let us begin with our first panelist. Valery?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for pronunciation my name. It's very rare occasion when on international forums it's being pronounced without any mistake. And this excellent opportunity, of course, to be present at this important panel, and thank you for this opportunity. I understand that we have very limited time, so I will give some thesis on the topic of our discussion. Now, what I want to present, the first view is What is South Caucasus itself? Is it a true region? In geographic terms, of course it is, but in political and economic terms, I doubt that it's a real region, because since we regained our independence, a lot of very unpleasant developments took place in our region. Wars, conflicts, hatred, and so on. So unfortunately, we can't say that South Caucasus is a full-fledged region at the moment. And of course, it's an arena for regional and global players clash, and all of these regional and global players, they have their own interests, and they're pursuing their foreign policy agendas according to their foreign policy priorities. And some of them are contributing to stability and integration of the region, to better regional cooperation, and some of them are trying to speculate on difficulties, differences, different positions, and having these policies of divide and rule in order to implement their foreign policy priorities in the way they understand. And in this respect, of course, the main problem of the region of the South Caucasus was, is, and will be in the future Russia. So one of the biggest problems for us all, I think, including Armenia, actually, who is declared to be strategic partner of the Russian Federation, is the how we can detain Russia, and how we can apply in the region Euro-Atlantic and European traditions, criteria, and standards of cooperation. And I strongly believe that the only perspective of the region is in its Europeization. And actually, I'm very happy that this is reflected in foreign policy agenda of Georgia. Out of the three countries, only Georgia is the one who has very clear-cut set of foreign policy priorities, top of them being Euro-Atlantic and European integration, with the ultimate role of membership in both in NATO and the European Union. But the region itself is fragmented. It's not the comprehensive region. It's fragmented. This is because our foreign policy priorities also differ very much. I mentioned Georgian foreign policy priorities, but Armenia, I know that is in the Eurasian Union and in the organization for Organization for Security. It's in Russian ODKB. Okay, so the security organization, which is being dominated by the Russian Federation, which includes except of Armenia, also Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia itself. And about Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan is an active member of the non-alignment movement and Organization of Islamic Conference. And so Azerbaijan is positioning itself as a neutral country. If you take, for example, relations of Azerbaijan with, in general, with the West and with the Russian Federation. Now, what are the perspectives? How can we finish this this period, this time of conflicts, and how can we move to better future for all our countries? Because if you take a look at the geopolitical and geoeconomic position of the South Caucasus, you will see that this region has actually immense opportunities. Excellent geopolitical position, natural resources, transit potential, tourist potential, educated 100% literate and very cheap labor force. So actually, we have everything in order to present here all necessary conditions for good quality life for our citizens. But unfortunately, so far it was impossible to implement this potential. Now, I believe that first of all, of course, if we will finish and if we will find the final peaceful resolution of the conflicts, it will contribute to our better understanding and better prospects, number one. And number two, I believe that true format for us to find our common way and follow our common vision is our trilateral format of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. One may think that it's a fantasy at the moment, but we have very good examples. We know historically that hundreds of thousands of French and German soldiers were killing each other, fighting for Alsace and Lorraine. But now you can hardly notice this border when you are moving from Germany to France. And I think that we will arrive to this situation also in our region earlier or later, but it's better earlier than later. But for that, we have to elaborate our common vision and follow our common agenda. And for that, we need this trilateral format. And I think that Georgia can contribute to that more than other countries because, number one, we have good relations with both Armenia and Azerbaijan, although with Azerbaijan we have strategic partnership, and with Armenia we are good neighbors and partners. Our Armenian friends are not happy with this definition, but it's just reflecting the reality. We have big diasporas of Armenians and Azerbaijanians in our country, and actually President Aliyev, when he was speaking about the future cooperation and coexistence of Armenians and Azerbaijanians, he mentioned this positive example of Georgia. He said that why, if Armenians and Azerbaijanians can live, cooperate together and in peace in Georgia, why can't we do it in the region wider? And number three, we are only country with this clear Euro-Atlantic and European aspirations. So we are a good platform for US and EU policy in order to strengthen presence in the region here and expand beyond EU borders, European standards, criteria, and principles of cooperation. I think that I am close to the limit of my time. Just a couple of words. What can United States do? First of all, very important is transatlantic partnership, strengthening of this transatlantic partnership, because when being put together, economic and military potential of NATO or economic potential of United States, Great Britain, and European Union together is overwhelmingly dominant in the world. And with this strong transatlantic partnership, we will limit capacity for Russia to undertake the destructive policies in the region. This is very important for us. For us, it's very important to be in the focus of the United States policies, for us as Georgia. And frankly speaking, I was a little bit disappointed when President Biden, speaking to Munich conference, when speaking about the necessity to deter Russia, he mentioned that in this context, it's very important for the United States to support the territorial integrity and independence of Ukraine. And Georgia wasn't mentioned. So I hope that in the future, Georgia, together with Ukraine, will stay in the focus of the United States. And what is also very important, to rebuild the cooperation of the United States with Turkey. Turkey is becoming more and more active player in the region, and from our perspective, it is good because Turkey is pursuing its policy in full conformity with the norms and principles of international law. Number one, and number two, so far, Russia treated this region as its backyard. Now Russia acknowledged the role of Turkey in Azerbaijan and therefore in the region. And this is a shift in Russian policy. It is interesting to think why it happened now, but this is, it will take more time. Now, having in the mind limits of time, I would like to stop here and will be more than glad to participate in Q&A session. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Oh, thank you for laying the issues out so very clearly. It's a wonderful way. Our first two speakers have just given us a terrific start. Now we're going to turn to Professor Srigalaya.
My greetings. Thank you for such kind introduction. Firstly, I would like to say and agree with Mr. Valeri that on a high level in Washington and during the global forums and conferences, we hear that Ukraine is the priority. But I would like to say that Georgia, its case and reality is the priority as well. Because the South Caucasus, Georgia, besides of all temporary challenges, is democratic country in the region. Russia is scanning US attitude toward Georgia, evaluates US reaction on occupation process, on imprisonment process of citizens of Georgia, and if from Western democratic world they see weak reaction and position on these painful events, Russia and its hybrid war methods, destructive active measures move forward more strictly. Fighting for territory and locked in a Cold War mindset, where if the West loses, we gain, Russian special agencies take extreme measures in region. Their actions may seem tactically effective, but they are strategically disasters. The myth about Russian military power and Russia as an unpredictable threat works because of Russian always. They try to change the configuration Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. I talked about the Russian NGOs, which are providing exchange program, try to provide, but beside these, minimum 80% of Georgians would like to study in US or EU. This means that Russian and US support. Why? Why? So, can you hear me now?
Right now we can, yes, but a few moments ago we could not.
Okay. Georgia, of course, is thankful for support which is provided by US from 1992, but now in this new phase of so-called Cold War, to create perfect union and democracy in Georgia, we need US support. And this is my view that
there is some
110%. Okay. Now it's okay now. Sorry for massive academic exchange programs for pupils, students, teachers, scholars, and fellows for active opinion making in democratic issues. More civic initiative, engage Georgian students and scholars in US political thought to analyze meaning of American political development. the region itself. Paving a way for all of us. No? Არის მის? არ ვიცი, აი ჩართულია, მიჩვენ.
Arvazit ismi Stordnikan.
Madam Moderator, maybe we will switch to the next speaker and we will try to fix the microphone or whatever it is here.
We switch to the next speaker, and then we and finish your talk. So our next speaker is Director Gradze.
First of all, let me thank my colleagues for the presentations and thank our organizers for the great opportunity to share our thoughts about situation in Georgia and perspectives which we have in this region, and our thoughts about cooperation with United States and other big strategic partners of our country. As most of you know, Georgia regained its independence 30 years ago, and the United States has always been, is, and remains being one of the proponents of our independence, a true strategic partner and the example for us, which Georgia's society, political elite, and states vectors are set. America's role is immeasurable in areas such as security, social and healthcare, economic development, military cooperation, and development, all development. I underline once again the importance of existing cooperation and need of its development. And together with this, I would like to emphasize the importance of cooperation in cultural, scientific, and educational fields. The United States has a special place in terms of scientific achievements, economic, practical applications of industrial experience. I think that the sharing of knowledge and experience in this field, the realization and development of Georgia's academic and scientific potential, Georgians' involvement of international scientific and educational processes will be a very important element in the cause of peace, stability, and democratic development in the whole region. What can US do for conflict transformation and full-scale peaceful resolution of conflicts in Georgia and the whole of region? The US and largely Western civilization is the choice made by our nation, our society, political elite, and the state. Today, our own internal standards need to be refined and improved, but the goal we have chosen is absolutely correct, and we understand that this is our uncontested future. US is the symbol of peace, freedom, and prosperity, and that's why it is a very important factor for those people who legitimately live in the conflict regions, and with the help of international society, first of all, United States, the Georgian state must become a bridge between those people who live in these regions and the values and achievements made by the United States and the whole Euro-Atlantic space. Democracy, human rights, a fair judiciary, and the conditions for self-realization and self-determination provided for each individual. These, among other things, should be the cornerstones of our cooperation and the basis for conflict resolution, in which our strategic partners can play a specific, and immeasurable role. Economic and financial exchange, cultural cooperation, provision of appropriate security conditions through international diplomacy. These are the areas where the United States and Georgia have great opportunities for cooperation. We have always had hope for Europe and America. Among many other examples, the efforts of our notable Georgians like Sultan Saba Orbeliani and others found common ground, and efforts to find common grounds and protection from Europe, for our regret, were not realized. Exactly 100 years ago, Hersuretian guerrillas appealed to the nation and government of United States and asked their help before Russian invasion. Now at this time, the voices of these people, the voices of these notable Georgians are heard by the Western world, and many things are being done for what we are really appreciate and really grateful. And at that time, I would like to emphasize that Georgian is, was, and will remain a part of free world and reliable ally of the leaders of free world. And at the same time, I would like to emphasize that Georgia is, was, and will remain a part of the free world and a reliable ally of the world, of the free world, in cause of peace, freedom, and development in our region. Thank you for your attention. Thank you once again.
I hope it's all right if I introduce a very distinguished guest who joined us a few minutes ago, Professor Alan Henriksen. He's Professor Emeritus at the Fletcher School. He taught American diplomatic history. Really, he taught international politics in a very broad way, and he mentored generations, absolutely generations of diplomats around the world. We're extraordinarily proud of him as a school, and I think it's a great honor to have him join us today. Could you give us a wave, Professor Henriksen? It's so good to see you. So our next speaker is Maya Ataashvili, and we welcome you to our panel.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this discussion. I think my colleagues from Georgia have made some really excellent remarks, and we've learned a lot through them. I think perhaps the best approach for me would be to go through the questions that were posed to us in the beginning of this discussion and give you my take on those. Especially, you know, this is such a peculiar time, not just in the Caucasus, but also in the world. So I think it won't hurt for us to be a little bit more pragmatic about what is happening in the world and what is realistic, what can be expected. For example, when I think about the question of what interest does the United States have in the Caucasus, I cannot help but say, well, the United States actually needs to decide whether or not it has interests in the Caucasus and what those interests are. To give you a sense of what I'm talking about, you know, under the Trump administration, if we look at the national security strategy, it spoke all about the great power competition. And if you look at the great power competition, and you look at the example of Russia, all of a sudden the Black Sea Caucasus region becomes incredibly important strategically, at least. But then, you know, that agenda was never really backed up with actions. So the United States didn't even have an ambassador to Georgia for quite a few years. And this was a time when we had some really major developments in the country where a more robust US presence would have been very helpful. I'm speaking about whether it's the 2019, summer 2019 Gavrilov night protests, or the ensuing political standoff, which has essentially lasted until this very moment. Then we look at the war in Nagorno-Karabakh this fall, and we see that there was very little response from the United States. And what we learned from that war, unfortunately, is that Russia gets to play the key deciding role. As we know, the result was that Russia brokered a ceasefire agreement finally after 3 attempts, but that was more successful than the one attempt that the US had to broker a ceasefire agreement. And not only did it broker a ceasefire agreement, as my colleagues already mentioned, Turkey had a really big role in mitigating this conflict. And now we have Russian peacekeeping forces in Nagorno-Karabakh. So if you look at the Black Sea, South Caucasus region, you end up with so-called Russian peacekeeping forces, which is essentially a significant Russian military presence all around Georgia, because you have South Ossetia, Abkhazia. On the other side of the Black Sea, you have Russian peacekeeping forces in Moldova. Russia has seized Crimea and supports separatist conflict in Donbas in Ukraine. Russia has partnered up with Turkey quite nicely, and now Nagorno-Karabakh, which is the territory between Armenia and Azerbaijan, also has significant Russian military presence. Where is the United States in this picture? It has been really difficult to figure out, not just on the rhetorical level, not just in terms of democracy support, but also in any other way. We have seen very little US response from the Trump administration. Now we come to the Biden administration, and I think I'm very interested, and I'm standing by to see what their national security strategy will look like. And we can only speculate about that. We know who's in the administration, so we know what perhaps we could expect. So that actually brings me to this next question, which is, do we expect US priorities in the region to change over the next few years? I very much expect at least a coherent strategy. Again, the US has not articulated its interests in the Black Sea Caucasus region for quite a few years now. So it would be, at a minimum, I'm expecting that there will be a lot more clarity from the Biden administration about the importance of the region. I'm also trying to sort of I'm speaking in this way because another huge loss that we have seen in the South Caucasus, it's not just a loss of territory to Russia. We're also seeing one of the most significant bouts of democratic backsliding in this region, particularly nowadays in Georgia. So there's plenty of work to be done, and it's time for a more robust American comeback. And then we talk about, so another question I have here is about, how can the United States contend with regional interests of Russia, China, Turkey, Iran? There's a lot of work to be done. Like I said, over the past 4 years, Russia has made some huge gains when it comes to, its aspirations to reestablish a special sphere of influence in the post-Soviet space, and particularly in the Black Sea Caucasus region. The upside of all of this still is that the United States, as well as the EU, still enjoy huge approval in the region, particularly in Georgia, in Ukraine as well. NATO enlargement is still at the very top of the wish list of the Georgian society. So there is a lot that the West can offer. It all starts with a security guarantee, right? So why is Russia able to keep using so many of its national powers in this region? It's because Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova, certainly Armenia, Azerbaijan do not enjoy any security guarantees like the NATO member states do, like the EU member states do. A NATO membership may still be a long ways away for Georgia and Ukraine, but certainly there are many steps that can bring these countries closer to the Western community and give them more incentives to come back to their path of democratic reforms. And again, I think we've seen Russia has really dialed up on its propaganda, disinformation efforts in the region. Yet the popularity of the of NATO and the United States has not really suffered. So although we've lost a lot of ground there, we can still build on our existing popularity. There is actually quite a bit of military assistance that the United States provides to Georgia and Ukraine in particular. But I think we can deepen our engagement a little bit more. Again, once we articulate our interests in the region. I think right now the administration, right, the Biden administration needs to first tell itself what it's looking for from its strategic partners. And I just want to add one thing about these, protracted conflicts in South Ossetia, Abkhazia, Nagorno-Karabakh, but not just there, of course, in Ukraine and in Moldova. The European Union, the EU external mission, as well as the OSCE are very deeply involved in these conflicts. But again, we've seen quite a bit of absence from the United States. It's really the USAID that is involved in these spaces, that is providing, basic aid and actually working very closely with the EU external mission and with the OSCE, although the OSCE does not have a permanent presence in Georgia. So the United States has the most amount of untapped capital when it comes to getting involved in these conflicts. The EU is nearly maxed out because it's doing quite a bit already. But the US really has more power and influence tools that it could deploy in these spaces. And I think one of the most important ways that it can work with the local governments is to look for ways to bring the societies together, to see, again, we are very well aware of really dire economic conditions in these spaces, especially again in Donbass, in Armenia, in Abkhazia, in South Ossetia. I cannot help but feel like there may be little opportunities for dialogue, little opportunities for building some confidence and trust. And again, I see a huge role for the United States to be a bit more involved in these conversations. So I will stop here because I am mindful of time, but I have a lot more things I wanted to add. So perhaps in the Q&A, I can jump in.
Thank you so much, Maya. I'd like to mention that Professor Srigalaya deeply apologizes for the technical difficulties, and he will be sending us his notes so that we're able to understand what he was going to say today. And now we're going to hear from Professor Chris Miller of the Fletcher School.
Well, thanks so much, Deborah, for the introduction, and thanks to all of our colleagues from both sides of the Atlantic for joining. I'll make a couple of brief comments trying to put the South Caucasus in the context of US foreign policy more broadly. And I think there are three reasons why for the United States, the South Caucasus will be more complicated over the next 10 years than it's been over the last 10 years. And the last 10 years have, of course, been plenty complicated. But I think there are three new factors that make a big difference. The first is the increasing US focus on China, which comes as no surprise. Deborah mentioned it, but it has huge ramifications for American policy in the South Caucasus and globally. And I think what it inevitably means is that there will be less bandwidth by US policymakers to focus on the South Caucasus than previously. So that's one big issue that the US-Georgian relations and US policy in the South Caucasus is going to have to think about. How do you manage that? That's A. The second thing is concerns about democratic backsliding in the region. The more it's possible to hold up Georgia as a model democracy, the easier it is for the US to work with it and devote resources to it. And I think today is as good a time as any to flag the challenges that narrative faces. And of course, the past year has not been a banner year for American democracy either. So there's plenty of ways the US and Georgia could probably work together to bolster their democratic institutions. But it's important that work actually happens, because the more you have democracy in question in any country, the harder it is for countries to work together as democracies. And the third challenge, which is something that others have alluded to, is the question of Turkey, which is, of course, a crucial regional player in the South Caucasus. And it will come as no surprise to anyone here that US-Turkish relations have been over the past couple of years at their lowest point in decades. And that's a real problem. It obstructs NATO's ability to work in a coherent manner in the Black Sea and the South Caucasus. It creates tension between Turkey and the European Union, and thereby obstructs the European Union's ability to pursue a coherent policy towards Eastern Partnership countries and in the region more broadly. And it distracts American attention from the region towards solving other problems when the US-Turkey relationship is creating additional problems on top of that. And it's unfortunately difficult to see how US-Turkey relationships can be easily put back on track. But I think it's a very important question for us to consider because it has huge ramifications for the countries in the South Caucasus as well. So I'll stop there and turn it back to Deborah, but I'd like to thank everyone for participating today. It's been an interesting set of discussions.
Thank you so much, Professor Miller. We said that we'd leave about 10 minutes for the panelists to ask questions of each other. And the first person who has his hand up is Lasha. By the way, if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand in the participant list and we'll get to you. Lasha?
Thank you, Dean, so much. Yes, we are limited in time, so I'm going to make this as brief as I can. I'm going to pick up on what Maya was saying, and just it will be more in a commentary fashion. So yes, I had to be a Debbie Downer here, but we have to sort of realize the other side of reality. Correct? We have regional. It seems to me that these conflicts are increasingly being regionalized, abandoned to regional issues and regional resolve. Russia, Turkey, Iran, you have Georgia, you have Armenia, you have Azerbaijan. Russia's latest actions with Azerbaijan were nothing but based on pragmatism and lack of care, really, what the West would think. That leaves countries like Georgia in a very disadvantageous position. So in terms of sort of overall sort of umbrella, if you look at a sort of an umbrella look or a bird's eye view of what's happening in the international system, I guess I could pose a question to all the panelists. To what extent do you think that the Biden administration, because there's been a lot of talk that he might turn this around after Trump, and there might be a significant return to old policies, democracy promotion, etc., or more attention given to those values. To what extent do you think that is realistic, given the current sort of shift from unipolar to multipolar world? And do you think this will be Biden administration will make enough effort to repenetrate the region, considering the realities of the international system that we see today? And anybody can jump in. I mean, this is not specific to any speaker, but perhaps. Okay, please, Mr. Valery, I guess.
So thank you, Lasha. It's a very good question. Sure. Actually, what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh after the Second War? What is good, internationally recognized border between Azerbaijan and Armenia was restored. That is good. What is bad? Russian peacekeepers up to 2000 were deployed in Azerbaijan, and we Georgians know better than anyone else what does it mean when Russian peacekeepers are coming to the country. Although I have to mention that our Azerbaijani colleagues, they are in better position in comparison with us, because Russian peacekeepers are located in an enclave, and they don't have an access to the Russian mainland. So this limits the capacity of Russia to play the games in Nagorno-Karabakh, and gives more control to Azerbaijan. Turkey, again, it's very important. I think that it's a shift, major shift of Russian policy, because they allowed other regional strong player, which is becoming more and more stronger, to have a strong say in the region after the Second War was over. And this, I think, because Russia itself experiences difficult times, sanctions, political problems, national separatism, regional separatism, oil prices, although in the late period they are going up, but it was a lot of damage, financial damage to Russia with low oil and gas prices in the past year. So I think that Russia is not in the position anymore to ignore such a strong player as Turkey is. And I think that I agree with Maya, of course, that unfortunately, United States as well as EU, they didn't have a strong word to say in this conflict resolution process. But now I think through Turkey, it's an opportunity to have more influence as well for the United States. And from this point of view, I think it's very important, and for Georgia, it's very important, Turkey to be back fully integrated in the Euro-Atlantic space. And from this, what I want to say also, that US-Turkey relations are very important to be improved and to come back to their previous quality, because for us it's very important for Turkey to pursue a collective NATO interests in the region rather to pursue individual interests of Turkey. And Turkey is our number one trade partner, investment partner, and so on, our good friend, but still cooperation of Turkey with the United States is very important in this context. And I myself, I have a question to Professor Chris Miller, if I may. When he spoke about the China, and it's understandable that China is high in the foreign policy priority agenda of the United States. China is more and more has more and more presence in Georgia. I mean, there are a lot of construction companies from China in Georgia working. China is becoming one of the most important markets for Georgian wine export, for example. But my question is, how Professor sees the role of the South Caucasus in the context of EU, in the context of US-China relations? What is expected from the South Caucasus in general and from Georgia in particular in this respect? Thank you.
Professor Miller? He seems not to be here at this moment. So we have two questions.
If you don't mind, because we actually published at FPR, Chris and I work together at FPRI as well. Chris has many affiliations. We wrote a couple of years ago a report on China's interests in the Black Sea region, and particularly in Georgia. As you mentioned, Georgia and China have a free trade agreement that they've signed quite a few years ago. So we've seen that be quite successful. But oftentimes, I think the way we see China in the Caucasus, we see it as yet another opportunity for Georgia to take advantage of this relationship and sort of balance, attract the Western interest even more, because they will have this interest to balance against China. So a good example for this was the Anaklia project. We saw the Anaklia project as a great opportunity for Georgia to bring in both European, American, and also Chinese investments, so that it would be a space where these powers would actually come together and coordinate and collaborate rather than sort of try to monopolize. Then we've also been looking quite a bit at China's interests in Europe, especially in Central Europe. China has started funding quite a few infrastructure projects in the Baltic Sea region, for example. We do not yet see that China is trying to completely take over the region like it has Central Asia, for example. So I think that Georgia is right to keep pursuing Chinese investments. It will just, in my opinion at least, it will just keep the Western investors even more engaged, again, just to sort of balance against China. But it does not seem, I mean, China has been in Georgia for quite a few years now, and it does not seem like that relationship is going to deepen that much more. I feel like we were expecting that relationship to sort of, the Chinese investments and infrastructure projects to sort of keep going up, but it plateaued sort of really early. And I think perhaps it has to do with the fact that Georgia has been just as adamant and interested to attract Western investments as it has been with China. So I think, unlike some of the Central Asian countries, Georgia is in a really fortunate position that it can take advantage of Chinese investments, but it does not seem like there is this immediate danger of some form of extreme Chinese takeover. But I highly recommend that report that we published. It's on fpri.org about China's interests in the Black Sea region. We have enough years of Chinese presence in the region that we can actually look at the track record and sort of anticipate how that relationship might go.
Maya, would you put that link on the group chat so everyone
exactly
has it?
Yeah, I'll do that right away.
Thank you so much. I'm going to exercise the chair's prerogative and call on a non-panelist just once before we complete the discussion amongst the panelists, because he has to leave, and he is from Turkey. He is a Fletcher GMAP graduate, and he's now doing his doctorate at Johns Hopkins University. So Serhat, perhaps you'd like to ask your question.
Hi, thank you very much, Dean Nutter. It's a pleasure to be here, to listen to distinguished panelists and to see some of our old colleagues. Thank you for having organized this important and timely event. I just want to start by making a couple of comments, in particular about Turkey's stance vis-a-vis South Caucasus and the larger, engagement within the NATO framework. I generally agree with what the panelists have expressed, and just want to add that I think the perception in Turkey has changed since 2016 towards a more multilateral world. So I don't think it sees the world in such bipolar terms anymore that it used to, like NATO versus Russia or East versus the West. There is, I think, a much more nuanced way of looking at it in Ankara these days to international relations. And I would say even that more defensive neorealism has taken hold rather than neoliberalism or neoliberal institutionalism compared to the period before 2016. So Turkey is looking for these opportunities in the region to expand its clout and influence. Rightly or wrongly, but that's another debate. And the panelists have also touched upon Turkey-US relations, which, as Professor Miller said, is at an all-time low. And it doesn't look like it's going to come up, back to where it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago anytime soon. But also we see that the US is hedging against Turkey's new positioning, because like for instance, next week there's going to be an exercise involving all the Balkan and Eastern European states called Defender Europe 2021, in particular with the involvement of Greece, Bulgaria, and Romania, Bulgaria and Romania are obviously coastal states to Black Sea. So that's another defensive measure against Russia's southward expansion. So maybe Turkey is not really that important from US foreign policy perspective in the region anymore. My question is, so that aside, my question coming back to Caucasus is about Armenia, actually. So Turkey has conditioned opening of borders with Armenia on Armenia's, historic claim to the so-called quote-unquote genocide and some maybe claims for compensation. Turkey now says that since the Karabakh war is over, we can go back and reconsider opening borders and start trading with Armenia again. But I read that Armenia is no longer keen on doing that. Like they don't have the same level of enthusiasm to go back to some kind of bilateral negotiation with Turkey. Is that the case? And why is it the case? Would Armenia not benefit from better relations with Turkey? Thank you.
Who would like to field that question? The rector, thank you. You're going to have to unmute. Excellent, yes.
ძალიან საინტერესო იყო შეფასებები და მინდა საქართველოსთან მიმართებაში რეგიონთან, ზოგადად სამხრეთ კავკასიასთან ქართული ხასიათი და არა მხოლოდ ქართული ხასიათის ერთი შტრიხი გამოვყო. ეს არის რომანტიზმი.
Thank you for your interesting discussion. And I want to point out one trait of Georgians. This is a romantism.
ძალიან კარგია რომანტიზმი, როცა საუბარია პოეზიაზე.
Romantism is very beautiful and useful when we think about poesy.
მაგრამ როცა ვლაპარაკობთ პოლიტიკაზე,
But when we speak about politics,
ჭირდება პრაგმატიზმი.
we always need pragmatism.
საუბრობთ სიცხადეზე.
We are speaking about clear things.
იგივე თქვათ ამერიკის დამოკიდებულებაზე საქართველოსთან მიმართებაში და ზოგადად რეგიონთან მიმართებაში.
Also the attitude of the United States about Georgia and South Caucasus.
მე დამატებითი სიცხადის შეტანა ამ ქვეყნის ურთიერთობაზე ჩვენს ქვეყნებთან არ მჭირდება, ისედაც ნათელია.
We think that it's already clear what kind of relationship is between the United States and Georgia.
და ურთიერთობის სხვა ფორმა ეს ისევ ჩვენზეა დამოკიდებული. ქართულ სახელმწიფოზე და რეგიონის სახელმწიფოებზე.
And to find a new form of dialogue is also depend on Georgian state and Georgians.
იგივე კონფლიქტებთან დაკავშირებით ყველამ ვიცით, რომ აფხაზეთის, ეგრეთ წოდებული სამხრეთ ოსეთის და ყარაბაღის პრობლემა, კონფლიქტი. საიდან ხდება და მოხდა ამ კონფლიქტის პროვოცირება?
And it also refers about the conflicts which are in South Caucasus, and we mean Abkhazian conflict, South Ossetia, and Nagorno-Karabakh.
მაგრამ ბოლომდე არ ამგონია, რომ გააზრებული კონდეს, რომ ეს არ ყოფილა მიზანი. ეს არის შედეგი. მიზანი სხვაგან დევს კონფლიქტის წარმოშობის.
We think that the reason of the conflict is not realized yet, and these reasons are very far from us.
და ჩვენ დღეს გაუთავებლად ვებრძვით შედეგს. შედეგთან ბრძოლა არ მოგვიტანს. სასურველ მიზნამდე არ მიგვიყვანს.
Unfortunately, we always try to be against the result of the conflict and not to try to resolving the conflicts.
მე არ მაშინებს რაოდენობა მოთამაშეების რეგიონში.
We are not afraid of the major players in the region.
არც რეგიონული ლიდერის სახელმწიფოების და რა თქმა უნდა არც დომინანტი სახელმწიფოების.
We are not afraid of dominant states or geopolitical or superpowers in the region.
ვიცით რა, რომ სამყაროს მართავს ერთი ფაქტორი, ინტერესი.
We also know that the world is governed by the interests.
მაშინ უნდა გავიგოთ, რომ რაც მეტია მოთამაშე, მით უფრო მრავალფეროვანია ინტერესი და შესაბამისად ამ ინტერესების თავსებადობა როგორც ერთმანეთთან, ასევე ქართულ სახელმწიფო ინტერესებთან.
And also when there is many players, so there are many own interests, and this own interest must be clarified with the terms of Georgian state.
ასევე მჯერა რომ თავსებადობა ინტერესების ქართულ სივრცეში ეს არის შეუძლებელი დიდი მოთამაშეების, გეოპოლიტიკური centrების, ტრანსნაციონალური კორპორაციების.
Also, sometimes the interests of our superpower countries are very different from Georgian interests.
მაგრამ ეს თავსებადობა შესაძლებელია სივრცის გაფართოების და სამოქმედო არეალის გაზრდის შემთხვევაში და ეს გაზრდილი არეალი არის სამხრეთ კავკასია.
But we want to try to find out our similar points, and this must be found in the South Caucasus.
და არც კონფლიქტები სამხრეთ კავკასიაში არსებული, თქვათ ჩვენი აფხაზეთის და სამხრეთ ოსეთის ეს არ გადაწყდება ორი ქვეყნის ურთიერთობის ფორმატში და არ გადაწყდება როგორც საშინაო პრობლემა მხოლოდ. არც ყარაბახის პრობლემა არ გადაწყდება რეგიონის შიგნით, რეგიონის ფორმატში.
Unfortunately, to resolve the conflict in Abkhazia, South Ossetia, or Nagorno-Karabakh is impossible if we use only internal side of these conflicts.
ეს პრობლემა არის ზოგადად რეგიონის პრობლემა და გადაწყდება ერთადერთ შემთხვევაში, ერთიანი რეგიონის კონტექსტში, მხოლოდ რეგიონულ კონტექსტში.
So far, these conflicts are regional conflicts, and we must think about the results of this regional conflict and try to solve these conflicts in the regional context.
როცა გავაჩენთ არა გაუთავებელ, რასაც ვამბობთ ხშირად, მიმზიდველობას, არამედ აი ამ სივრცის საჭიროებას და აუცილებლობას.
We must create our attractive peace space.
როგორც ახალი სამშვიდობო სივრცის ფორმირების შესაძლებლობას.
And we must to find out our new space for peace process.
და ამიზნით ჩვენი ფორმატი განსხვავებული. ეს არის საქართველო, Azerbaijan, Somkheti.
And we must unite Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia.
როგორც ერთიანი მე არ გულისხმობ მოწყობის რაიმე ფორმა სამხრეთ კავკასიის ან თავისუფლების შეზღუდვის ხარჯზე, ფედერაციას, კონფედერაციას, არა.
As a sovereign and freedom country and states.
დამატებული რა თქმა უნდა, რუსეთის ფედერაცია ჩვენ მოგწონს თუ არ მოგწონს.
And plus, the Russian Federation must be added in this dialogue. Because to exist this dialogue important, it is very essential to recognize the power of the Russian Federation in the region.
Turkey.
Also, we must add Turkey,
Iran. რა თქმა უნდა, კიდევ გამეორდები, ამერიკის შეერთებული შტატები, ევროკავშირი და საერთო შეთანხმების შედეგად ჩინეთი.
And of course, the United States, the European Union, and if there will be any agreement about China, of course, China is very important to be in the dialogue.
საუბარი იყო ჩვენს საგარეო ორიენტირზე და ჩვენს ევროატლანტიკურ მისწრაფებებზე.
When we speak about our foreign policy and our foreign transatlantic wishes,
და არ მინდა გავექცე სურვილს და რეალობას, შესაძლებლობას.
But we must point out what is the reality and our wish.
ჩვენი ურთიერთობის ხარისხი ნებისმიერ ჩვენს პარტნიორ სახელმწიფოსთან ვერ გადაფარავს ურთიერთობის ხარისხს და იმ შესაძლებელ საფრთხეს, მოსალოდნელ საფრთხეს, რაც ამ ქვეყანას აქვს რუსეთის ფედერაციასთან.
Of course, it is very important to have a very strong relations with other countries, but it is very essential also to point out the role of Russian Federation in the peace process and dialogue, also when it refers on conflicts.
ანუ ჩვენი მომავალი დამოკიდებულია პროცესებზე. რა თქმა უნდა, რაც მიდის სამყაროში, მაგრამ ჩვენს წარმოდგენებზე ამ პროცესებთან მიმართებაში და ამ პროცესებში საქართველოს როლზე და ადგილზე.
Our fortune is also relies on our external foreign policy reasons, but also we must not to forget that the attitude of our other countries about Georgian policy is very important.
დამატებით სარგებელზე, თან ამ სარგებლის მიღებაზე ბალანსის დაცვით.
Also, we must be oriented on balance and our future prosperity.
ხოლოდ ეს აქცევს ჩვენს ქვეყანას მოთამაშეთ აი ამ სივრცეში.
And in this case, we must be a very good player in the region.
Yeah, thank you so much. We don't really have much time left. I would like to note that a Turkish diplomat has joined us. He's also a graduate of the Fletcher GMAT program. I wonder if Farouk would like to make a brief before we end the session. Farouk, are you there? Are you listening? Well, he's there, but I guess has his microphone turned off.
Hello.
Oh, there you are, Farouk. Yes, would you like to make a quick comment on Turkey's role in the area?
Well, I can just add some comments to Serhat's what he mentioned about Turkey and Turkey's relation with Armenia. I think the latest status in the Caucasus is open a big opportunity for Turkey at least, but it's a narrow when it's come to the situation in the Caucasus, especially for the Armenia. But I think the rapprochement process between Armenia and Turkey started in 2009. So this process, the rapprochement process, was blocked mainly by Azerbaijani veto at that time because Azerbaijan doesn't want Turkey to open its borders with Armenia. So this process, it was a hopeful process between Turkey and Armenia, but this time I think this blockade by Azerbaijan is, we can say it's not there anymore because Azerbaijan has itself offered a cooperation platform consisting of 6 countries in the region. Of course, it's quite hopeful to expect countries, especially from Armenia, to start a rapprochement process with Turkey after this second Nagorno-Karabakh war. But I think there is an opportunity, slight opportunity, but there is an opportunity to make a peace, at least start to make a rapprochement between Turkey and Armenia in the region. And this will, I think it will also add a lot of prospects to the region when it comes to create a regional cooperation and also relieve the country, especially the country in the South Caucasus, to relieve the Russian tensions over these countries, as Russian pressures.
Thank you so much, Farouk. We're going to have to end in just a few moments, so I don't think there's even time for another question, but someone has a question in the chat box that I think he could just ask and leave as food for thought for us. Professor Henriksen, would you ask your question or your comment?
Yes, thank you. I'm intrigued by the suggestion of university diplomacy and also by the concept of the trilateral format. And my question is, can there be a relationship between them? That is to say, could universities in the region, led by your own, working with other universities in Armenia, Azerbaijan, such as the Ada University, could they provide a kind of track 2 effort to regenerate a sense of a true South Caucasus region, which would be non-religious, that is to say, it would be secular in character, and it could also have a democratization emphasis, which would fit in with the new emphasis of US diplomacy under the Biden administration.
So I don't know, Arik, do we have time to answer that, or do we need to sum up now?
I think we can answer it, but just very briefly. And I know that we are out of time. So for those of you who have other commitments, you're free to leave, but we can stay for a couple more minutes.
All right. Who would like to answer that question? Valery?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question, because it's the very essence of what we are doing now in Sokhumi State University. We have elaborated new magister program, Diplomacy and International Relations, which is based on the course of University Diplomacy, which was presented by Professor Honelidze, Rector of University. And the essence of this program is to bring together in one university under one program all the ethnic minorities and to present them the perspectives of the region and how we can better utilize the potential which belongs to all us. And the main idea of the program is that better Europeization will open new perspectives for all these countries. So bringing to the South Caucasus European standards, practice, criteria, and traditions of cooperation will give us an opportunity to build the space as European Union did after the World War II. Because European Union, maybe it's not the best example, but there is nothing better in our neighborhood. And it's very good example to follow. And in our program, we have two parallel programs actually, in Georgian with the third semester in English, in Russian, which is actually the same synchronic program, but the same semester Russian, English, the third one. And to this Russian-speaking Russian program, we are inviting not only Georgian citizens of Azerbaijani and Armenian origin, but also students from Armenia and Azerbaijan itself. And in the third semester, we'll put all these people, all these students from Georgia, from Armenia, from Azerbaijan, hopefully maybe from North Caucasus. And also we are counting that our compatriots from Abkhazia and South Ossetia would also join us. We'll put them in the same auditorium, in one auditorium, and all speak and think about our common vision, how to overcome current problems and create better future for all of us. So I think that this will help us to implement our mission of Sokhumi State University to reintegrate not our compatriots only, including ethnic minorities, of course, but to contribute to better integration of the region itself, of the South Caucasus.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful way to end. I know everyone here joins me in admiring what Sokhumi State University is doing. And we are all so pleased that the Fletcher School is going to be a part of your efforts. It's just it's a wonderfully hopeful thing in the region. Going back to hope, I should mention that I'm sitting in a very beautiful library. Perhaps you're all wondering if I own this library. I do not. This is the library called the Union Club in Boston. I know Professor Henriksen knows it well. I happen to be staying here. And so as I listen to the problems Georgia is facing, I think of the problems the United States was facing when this Union Club was formed. We were in the middle of a civil war in the 1860s. The country was totally divided. European countries had taken opposite sides. And yet somehow the country was able to come together with great leadership, not only at the very top with our president, Abraham Lincoln, but with the help of people such as those who founded this club. So I think there is hope here. And the role of the United States, I know, is key. The rector mentioned all the countries that can help or hurt your process, but I think we know the United States remains key. The Biden administration said at the Munich Security Conference the other day, the United States is back. I should mention that the chair of the Munich Security Conference is a Fletcher graduate, Wolfgang Ischinger, and he had previously been the EU Special Envoy to Ukraine. The question is, to what is the United States back? It's a very different world. In the United States, the Biden administration is going to have to really rethink so much as it sees the world change. I just join with the other woman on the panel, Maya, in saying that I hope the Biden administration is steady. I hope it not only uses its power carefully, cautiously, and meagerly, but that it does support those either struggling to find democracy in the world or those who are trying to hold on to their democracies. I thank Eric and Chris Miller for inviting me to be a part of this. I've been so honored to meet you all and to hear about your wonderful efforts at Sokhumi State University. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I would like to also thank Arik and Russia-Eurasia program in the Fletcher School, as well as Professor Miller for hosting this. We could not be more grateful. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Goodbye, all.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much for this great opportunity. Thank you.